other thank yous here as well. First to Chris Oliver and Mr. Tannehill for putting this stuff together for us, and to Chris's wife, Jen, who's one of my favorite players of all time that I had the opportunity to coach. Hi to Jen out there. You know I'm following, I think, Sean Swords right now. And I think when I looked at myself in the schedule, I plugged myself in behind Sean a little bit on purpose because I had the opportunity to work with both of Sean's sisters, coached with both of them back a while ago. And I had the opportunity to coach Sean when he was a young player between the ages of 10, I think, and about 18. And when I look at game-winning style, he was actually at a pretty formative time for me as a coach that I was working with him and a very talented group of players. I think previous to that time, I generally tried to fit my players to the style that I wanted to play. And then you get a player like a Sean, and Sean didn't like to play inside the box very much. He wanted to be a little bit of an innovator as a player as well. And it really taught me that, getting the most out of your great players that you have along the way is essential. So developing that game-winning style to match players became more of my mindset rather than having the players fit the style that I want to run all the time. I have one aspect of our game-winning style that's a constant. It would be in our quarter court defense. Our philosophies have remained pretty constant for about the last 20 to 25 years. We've changed quite a bit in that style, but that general idea of making players play to their weaknesses and teams play to their weaknesses is really our defensive quarter court mindset that has remained pretty much a constant. You'll see a couple of clips over the course of the videos that I'll show that'll show you how we bring that stuff into play. So when you look at, I'm going to start by just showing a video clip of our national bronze medal game. No, this was the Capital Hoops Classic game this year. So we'll run that for a minute or so.
Capital Hoops Classic is the University of Ottawa taking on the Carleton Rangers to get started this evening here at TD Place, and we are ready for tip-off.
Too fast to prepare for this. Tripping in the world could be dangerous.
Angela Riveridge down low with that first bucket of the game. They go inside again. Backs down on Sereno. The bucket is good. She's got 4 points. Not able to get the three. Susanna Provo, the corner three, knocks it down. That's the lead.
Whatever it's
Inside to Angela. Riveridge is good.
Now, I hope that wasn't breaking up. I think it was maybe a little bit. I apologize for that. So when you look at that clip, you could see that our game-winning style this year was maybe a little bit different than a lot of teams, in that we had a strength from a post perspective this year that not a lot of teams in the country had. So we played a little bit of that old style of basketball. Now, over the course of the next 45 minutes or so, I wanted to look at some specific areas. Why is game-winning style important? From the perspective of matching your style to your players, you're probably going to get the most out of your players if you do that. Your roles and responsibility in developing your game-winning style, that's on the part of the coaches, the leadership team, the support staff, and the players as well, and how all those things piece together. Your offensive and defensive structures that potentially you'll be able to use to give yourself the best opportunity for success. And then the analytics that come into play, as well as for us, the areas of team culture and the influence that that has on our team, as well as the perspective of so the analytics and team culture. Sorry, I was also just thinking about the end of season review that we'll do when the season finishes. So first off, the role of the coach. So we've all been influenced by coaches over our past, and for me, I was influenced by a coach named John Kirkconnell, who was my high school coach. John, there were some important things that happened for me for the first few years after that, and John then decided he would let me take over the high school program after 1 year of playing for him. I then had a player named Dave Smart enter into the program, and Dave was somebody great who was great at challenging ideas, and eventually became obviously a great innovator in the game. So there's been a lot of influences along the way. But when we talk about a game-winning style, we've got to make sure that we look at the best practices of teams that you're going to be playing against, and make sure that you as a coach are dynamic and fluid in changing to the times. Your game-winning styles won't result in wins. The character and the quality of players that you have is going to play a major factor in that. You do need, and even if that's the case, it's going to create a winning culture, which is truly, I think, what the important thing is, as much as winning is. Developing an offensive and defensive structure based on the team's personnel. So as I mentioned before, from a defensive perspective, we'll typically play with a particular philosophy. But we are very fluid in our offensive structure and what we do as it relates to the 90-foot game versus the half-court game. And it does generally for us reflect back on our players. We want to teach each player the required skill set to allow them success within our game-winning style. But as I said, our game-winning style often isn't established until we know the roster that we're going to have for that coming year. Team environment. These are all things that are essential for every team. And then when I look back on the word trust, that one for me became a major part of my vocabulary 15 years ago when I was coaching, assistant coaching at Carleton University. And our team won a national championship. And on the inside of our national championship ring was the word trust. And it was our motto that year. And it was something that we really developed both on and off the court. And if you're going to be successful, it has to be a major part of your team's game plan. Respect. And I'll talk a lot about respect when we get into the role of the individual player. Accountability as well on the part of the coach, that you understand that the relationship that you have with your players, it's very different. I've had the opportunity to coach from probably 8 or 9 year olds up to 30-year-olds. So the difference is quite different as far as what you're going to get from accountability, from an understanding of the game. But the respect side of things is something that is a constant throughout your coaching career. And then obviously communication, which is a major facet for any team. So when we look at players, for us on the player side of things, there's an excellent book called The Captain's Class, and I refer to it because for me it was a little bit of a time where I had a little bit of a light bulb moment. Speaking to the light bulb moment, we had a recent coaching U Sports coaching group get together on Zoom. And one of the questions that was posed is, what is your light bulb moment over the course of your coaching career? And my first reaction was my light bulb moment was the development of review plans. But when I actually look at it from a coaching perspective, and it's one of the reasons I think that coaching is such a great profession and something that people last in for a long time, is that it's ever changing. You have light bulb moments all the time, almost weekly. In fact, I would say you're getting those moments that you get a little bit more clarity or direction that you feel like you want to go. So from the perspective of player leadership, I read the captain's class and it looked back on leaders and that the most successful teams throughout history have had good coaching, but I think that the key ingredients with all of the top 16 teams of all time in all the sports that the writer looked at was that they had great leadership. Some of them were great players, but most of them were not the great players. Most of them were filling the roles that you needed to have that resulted in respect. And they showed it through all of the things that they did. They had a high degree of accountability. And I think of Bill Russell, for example, who won 11 championships, the most, I think, of any player, and won a couple of national championships as a coach following his time as a player. And, he would virtually do everything and didn't have to be the person who was scoring the points, but he was the person that everybody looked to. So really, when I finished that book, I came from a different perspective, that the coach is certainly an important aspect, but only a part of this whole thing. So in the trust and responsibility, you can see that coaches empower leaders and leaders empower players. So, for example, this is the COVID time right now, and we've tried to use that time as effectively as we possibly can with our team. So we are meeting every Monday individually. And then we've already split our leadership group up with the incoming players. We have 8 new recruits coming in this year. It's an exciting recruiting class for us. But we really feel, with the inability right now for us to get on the court, we wanted our 4 major leaders on the team who have the experience to get small group settings with that group. And they're now working with individual small groups of 4 to develop their leadership skills. We'll rotate those groups over the course of the year so that we really empower those leaders and let the new players know what the important role is for leaders. So with accountability, it's both players and team that come into play. Your leaders have to be accountable as players from the perspective of modeling the behavior that all of the team will learn to model over the course of your season. The team in general, leaders need to lead the team with both their actions and their words. And we have a great group this year. And the teams that have always done the best that I've coached have always had those ingredients. Communication. So our constant communication, coaches, players, and support staff. And I couldn't speak more strongly about support staff. And the fact that, this was a discussion I had with our trainer a couple of years ago, who'd done a great job for us. And in fact, your trainer probably knows better what's going on inside the team than you will as a coach. They spend a lot of one-on-one time with the players. So having everybody on the same page with your game-winning style goes from pretty much the top of your organization, your athletic director, through everybody in the organization, including your support staff, not just your coaches and players. I think it's important when you look at empowering coaches, empowering leaders, is the priority is that everybody has to have a clear voice through to everybody in the group. So empowering your leaders to help and support your players doesn't mean you don't make that part of your priority as well as a coach. Now, knowledge of game-winning style, you want to make sure that you're role modeling, and they will be role modeling. They share and guide the players on their team. The interesting thing about the relationship between the captains or the leaders of your team and the players is that, the coach can say something to the players and they may not hear the message. But if the leadership on the team and the captains on the team share the same message, usually they'll respond in a positive way and try to make the changes as quickly as possible. So it's an important aspect of the leader's role is that they understand and they have the knowledge of your game styles. and they support the younger group and actually teach the younger group. When we do a lot of split up drills in our practices, the players do a lot of those leadership groups on their own. Now, from a player perspective, and I'm going to slip down one clip here because I think it's an important clip in this overall picture. So this first quote is a quote that's on one of my assistant coaches' cover on everything that you see with him. Show class, have pride, display character. If you do, winning takes care of itself. Okay? If you can look at the faces, because I think what was super important on this is looking at the reaction of this group of players. These three players were starters on the team. These others were role players, depth players on the team. Okay? And one of the quotes I thought that crossed well over to that photo was the quote that was at the bottom from Coach Martin from South Carolina after they had done so well in the national championship. And you can read that quote over, but the key part of that quote for me is the last one, which is "There was only love." And the reality is we can talk all we want about players and their roles and responsibilities, but if you don't recruit players or develop the players so that they've got the looks that those players had on their face, I don't think we're giving the team the true experience that's required. So, that's a very important aspect for us, is that we have that from our individual players. So that's part of their responsibility. But along with the responsibility of us creating an environment and the leaders creating an environment that lets that kind of thing happen, it's important that the players understand some key things. Asked one of our leadership group questions in this past couple of weeks was, what was the biggest transition for you when you came from high school or cégep, as our players do, into university level of play? And it was an interesting question. And the answer to that question they unanimously had was sleep. So when you think about I didn't think that would be their response, but it totally made sense after you considered what the expectations are of our student athletes at our level. We have academics as obviously their number one priority, and we prioritize family first, academics second, basketball third, and social fourth. So for us, the academic side of things is something that they are personally responsible and accountable for. Now, we have the support mechanisms in place at university to help them keep organized that way, but it's a key ingredient. Their skill development is their responsibility. We do it in individual sessions with a combination of our leaders and our coaches. Their physical and mental health. And for those people who know me, know that this aspect is right at the top of my list, almost at the start of every game right now. My first conversation with the coach on the other team is, how are things going for you and how are things going for your team? We've experienced and will all experience as coaches over the course of our time, players who deal with either poor mental health or mental illness. I'm on the board of directors for the Canadian Centre for Mental Health and Sport, which is a non-for-profit, which is a growing organization, which is helping our student athletes and athletes across the country get support. Now, the follow-up to that is we obviously need to understand what our game-winning style is to get onto the topic of the conversation, and to support that game-winning style. So it isn't the head coach. I mean, the head coach is the final decision in this, but where your team comes from is really communication, leadership. Your assistant coaches all need to come together to come to this realization of what your game-winning style should be. And then there was an interesting podcast, and it might have been on Chris's podcast, where I think it was actually, where they talked about losing and what are the reasons people lose as opposed to the reason that people win. Now, understanding the barriers to individual performance is an essential part of that side of things. But from the perspective of players, you need to know as a player, what are the things that are limiting your ability as a player, and learning to mitigate those things, being able to talk about them. If you can't talk about them, your young player will always struggle with that. So following up with that, respect. All players understand, respect, and accept their role on the team. Trust, both on and off the court. Grit and character. Will your players rise to the challenge? And the reason I use the word grit there is the word of the day right now is probably resilience. And I think it's a great word, and it's one that we obviously will use in our vocabulary as well. But I think the term grit takes a toughness level to things that you hope that you can find in players, and character as well. I mean, obviously those two are intertwined and one fits into the other. So, developing an offensive game-winning style. Okay, and I think this is probably, if I was to say as a coach out there, you know, there's the philosophical side to this discussion, and then there's the actual, okay, what style of basketball do I want to play? And as I said, as a coach, we want to make sure that we're fluid and that we have the ability to change, because things are going to happen. When I was talking to Dave yesterday briefly, we talked about the seasons that we just had. And I said to him, I thought Lethbridge had a great start to the year last year. And he talked a little bit about the injury woes that they got hit with. And you know, I reflected to him, you know, we got hit with something similar this year. We had developed a game-winning style that included an up-tempo style of basketball with full court pressure and transition. And we ended up losing 3 of our top 6 or 7 players to season-ending injuries. So we really needed to revamp our style in the middle part of the year. Well, if your players don't have grit in their vocabulary and resilience in their vocabulary, your ability to make that change is not really possible. But if they do have that in their vocabulary, and that is a learned behavior and an environmental thing on the team, you're going to find that you have the ability to make changes when changes have to be made. Okay, so for us, we want to match our players' skill set, okay, our offense to our players. So given the 2 choices there, I prefer to be in that first category, but that doesn't mean that matching your players to your philosophies doesn't work. Transition and flow are key components. Okay, so for us, this comes from the perspective of, and we'll look a little bit at synergy. And I know you guys probably have been following along. I've watched probably enough synergy to last you a lifetime, but I'll show a couple of the key points that we look at when we look at developing our game-winning style. And for us, it really falls into the area of looking at the 24-second clock offensively and defensively. So if you look at the offensive clock, and for the first 8 seconds of that clock, which is your primary transition, maybe the start of secondary, but your primary transition, your points per possession at that particular time of the clock is going to be your highest. Your quality of shot is going to be your best, and your assisted field goal percentage is going to be the highest. So you want to make sure in this day and age that, especially with the 24-second clock, which we have in Canada, I know the US is running 30-second clock, which changes the game a little bit, but that transition is a key aspect of the game. As the clock goes down, so does your quality of shot, to the point that if you are shooting in the last 4 seconds of the clock, typically you'll find the wrong player shooting the basketball, and your points per possession goes way down. Okay, so you need to take that into consideration when you're trying to create your game. Now, the transition game, and the reason I say flow in there is that with the 24-second clock, you really don't have time to waste between different aspects of the transition to secondary break, to offense, to end of clock situation. So the flow through that is essential. Perimeter post play, and this comes down to old style, new style a little bit. So creating help defense through matchups is really what I'm talking about with that. So really, can we create that help situation? And if you have a great post player, the easiest way to create a double team situation, which opens up things for your teammates, is to just throw the ball to the low post who has to be guarded by two. And we've had that situation for the last number of years, having had a couple of All-Canadians who've been post players for us. So that's the easiest way for us for post-oriented teams to create that. But if you have great ISO players on the perimeter of the floor, you can create that same situation with dribble penetration and quality passing. This year we had a great 6'5" post player. We had an All-Canadian point guard. And if you have those two things, you're probably going to have a successful campaign. And that sort of reflects back to a clinic that I went to. Probably, maybe some of you were at it. It was a Nike clinic in Toronto, and Jim Valvano was talking at it, and it was right after Jim had won the national championship, and so he was speaking at that clinic, and one of the people at the clinic in the question time put up their hand and said, "Coach, I don't have a great point guard. How do I win?" And his response to that, I think those of you who were there would probably remember it. It was, if you don't have a great point guard, you're going to expletive lose. It sort of fit the question that was asked, and it was really one that probably hit me, and that's almost 30 years ago now, but it was one that hit home for me, because from that point on, recruiting became a top priority for me. And making sure that we had point guards, and I've recruited 2 additional point guards this year. I like to have at least 2 or 3 point guards on the floor at all times. Okay, so the follow-up. Allow your players to have the freedom to make decisions. Anticipation, read, and react. Basketball, this is where the area of basketball has changed the most since I started coaching. Basketball used to be a read and react game. You saw something, you caught the ball, you made a player make a move, you made a fake, and you made a play. Basketball has become a game of anticipation. Steve Nash had a lot to do with it in the game of basketball, a big Canadian who, started to see things happening before they were happening. The Wayne Gretzky of basketball. Movement off the ball. These are all keys to developing your game-winning style. Spacing, cutting, and screening. Now, developing a defensive game-winning style. I'll show some clips in a minute. I put in a little clip here that was my wife's idea. She's a grade 1 teacher, but I thought it would work for the situation. You can see the tall girl who's sweating with the small defender, putting ball pressure on the ball, and it was a small team versus a tall team. Well, we can think of that from the situation of the Golden State Warriors. If the Golden State Warriors have got 5 all-stars on their team that all shoot the 3 better than your team, are you going to be able to play that same game that they play and expect to win those games? I would suggest you're probably going to have to figure out your game-winning style and try to figure out another way to make it happen. So, that's what that picture sort of said to me. Anyways, the player-to-player defense versus zone is really relating to picking the defense that fits your players. Now, for us, that doesn't mean that we won't play our man-to-man defense. We will typically stay with man. We'll just change our principles of our man to match our personnel. Using the clock to your advantage, I mentioned that before. We obviously want to just reverse the discussion I had about the clock onto the defensive end of the floor. And for us, as a team, we were the 100th percentile team with defensive transition this year in the country. So that is always the start of our defensive game plan. If you don't control other teams' transition, you're going to give up a lot of points. We do that a number of ways. And it's interesting, at the most recent clinic that was going on with our national team, they talked about the women's team. They talked about the French team having to redevelop their defensive transition to stop the transition game of the French national team, who had put a game plan in that could beat our national team transition. So it does have to be controlled. Using the clock to your advantage then is a major aspect. Trying to get teams into that last 4 seconds of the clock. Full court transition defense. obviously is a key. It could be full court man, or it could be get back quarter court man, stopping their transition. Both ways work. Secondary transition defense. Once again, teams in our preparation for games, we typically figure out what the team is running with their secondary transition, which will be a relatively small number of options, and we want to make sure we control that. And then obviously our quarter court defense has the concept of trying to put players to their weakness, which in 90% of the cases will be weak hand, and then taking advantage of, and the clips I'm going to show you right now are related to some of what I just talked about. Okay. So this first clip is in our last game of the year against Ryerson. And I talked about the term anticipation. Now, we've got a push-through play going where Brooklyn, our point guard, is pushing the guard through to set a cross screen, small on big on the weak side block. Okay, so that's taking place over here. At this time, we're going to ball screen on this wing. And Bridget, our starting four, reads her defender, anticipates the lock-in, and flares immediately on the play. Now, on the flare in this situation, one of our reads off of the ice is an automatic backdoor cut if there's an overplay. So this distraction we create on the weak side of the floor is to create this situation with their defenders, making their defenders turn to hedge our big post, who happens to be the player of concern for most teams' opposition from a defensive perspective. So you can see it's going to open up the backdoor cut with players who are not ready to help in that situation. Now, for every play that we have like this, we have about 5 different options as it relates to teams that ice, for example. So for every action, there's going to be an anticipation for us first, which is what you saw, and then it will be an action reaction that follows up the play. So this ends up with a backdoor cut and a layup and a great offensive rebound position on the weak side of the floor, because this is the conversation that comes down to who you want to be and how badly you want to offensive rebound the ball. Now, this is a conversation I had with our men's coach, and our men's team had almost gotten to the point where they didn't go to the offensive glass very much. They weren't being rewarded offensive rebounding, and the idea is don't go hard to the offensive glass, because if you don't go hard there, you're not going to give up transition. So the logic to that is clear. But for us, we've been averaging somewhere between 15 and 20 offensive rebounds a game. So it does mean that we do want to send players to the offensive glass, and we've recruited very good bigs. So that for us is a priority. So we do like to send as many players to the offensive glass as the team will allow us to send. Now, this is an example of us on the offensive end of the floor, okay, playing through our post play. And there's about 3 or 4 of these possessions in a row that says, okay, what are we trying to create? We're trying to create the double team situation, which results in the open shot for your shooters who need to space appropriately and effectively. Okay, so that's sort of a constant for us in our game plan. Now, one of the things you've got to be able to do is you need to be able to teach players how to screen. It's one of the most lacking skills for players who are coming out of high school now, because there's so much anticipation played in the game of basketball. And at the lower levels now, there's not a lot of ball screening and off-ball screening. So it's actually a skill we have to work pretty hard on when players enter into university. I'm not saying do more of that at the younger age level, because in fact, I think the skills that they're learning now at that age level is making our game into a much better game. But they do need to learn to set good screens. And this is an example of our first year point guard recruit for us, Snatsky Sokin, who's setting a good back screen for a player and creating 2 players on 1. It's going to create opportunities, obviously, for players when you do that. This is an example of why we wanted to take advantage of our bigs. because the one-on-one scores for us, our adjusted field goal percentage from a score perspective was higher for our bigs than it was for our guards, shooting only 2s. So just an example of the double down situations that, and you could see the previous time we'd played Carleton, Angela had scored 24, so they were going to come on her with a lot of players. And obviously that opens up all the things that come out of that with quality inside-outside passing. Now I want to move down a little bit and look at some of the defense of the defensive side of things here. So just looking at our concepts as it relates to maybe something that you just saw on the other end of the floor, which was the ice. Okay, so we do the same thing. This side of the floor, typically we want to hedge. We do not want to take our big away from the basket. I know there's a tremendous amount that we're getting into this, but every time Angela gets extended out beyond the three-point line, she struggles to get back involved with the play. So if we ice Angela, it leaves her in that position on the floor and pushing the ball this direction, which is a logical thing for us to do, which we do with her in a lot of cases. But what then ends up happening is this player, if they attack aggressively, is quick enough to go by our big. So we have to change up some of the concepts. Now with Angela, you can see this is a quick hedge and a quick recovery. Our bottom of the eye is in position to help out if this role player is coming to get the ball. This is basket protection or bottom of the eye. Typically on this one, and this is a pretty solid defensive play overall for us, Angela will play their post as a dead. There's no double downs when Angela guards their post. So now the diagonal skip pass happened with pretty good ball pressure. The closeout happens from Bridget on one of the best three-point shooters in the country. She shot 50% this year from Ryerson. So we're going to make her put the ball on the floor with her left hand and come in to help. She comes into aggressive help for us. We keep 2 on the ball in this situation to prevent any easy exit pass. Angela, who can play backside of their big, because if they throw it to her, she's a shot blocker, okay, is there to recover on it. So the ball now we're late in the shot clock. You can see we're down into that last part of the clock, okay? And our defense accomplished what you would want your defense to accomplish in that situation. So we're just controlling transition right now. This is a Carleton game. And from the perspective of us going to the ice on this side of the floor. Now we play it a little bit differently. This is the non-shooter on Carleton's team over here that's been identified. This is a lesser shooter than the girl who's in the corner of the gym. So the game plan on this is to lock the ball in and push it into our help. This is also a shooter for Carleton, so we want to take care of that popping player so they can't run that pop situation. So off of this, we created what we wanted, and Carleton stepped her to the short corner, and we give up the 15-footer. And this, for us, is a great rebounding situation, okay? So that idea with our team concepts hopefully makes sense to everybody. Okay, this is I think they're going to run a high, so we lock this one in. Okay, we're not as worried about the non-shooter in this situation. Now, they've created the mismatch that they wanted when we rotated to take care of the pop. But that for us is an automatic double team. So our mismatched guard will be communicating that it's an early double required. So we go right away to the double team with our big's job is to take away the diagonal skip. We were a little late on this, but you can see the bump action that we've got here with replacement to put ball pressure on this player, make her go to the left, and for us to have them play through the play so that at the end of the clock, this is Ryerson's non-shooter taking the shot that we would prefer that she take, and us in pretty good rebounding position. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea about where our team concepts are when it comes to that side of things. Now, from an analytics perspective, looking at this side of things and how we look at analytics, and I'm hoping I'm not running out of too much time. With analytics, we'll look at best practices across the country. So for us, when we look at analytics, we knew at the start of the year that we needed to have, from an offensive perspective, an adjusted field goal percentage of about 48%. That is the number that across the country people are aspiring to get to, because they know that that number will result in an offensive game, and adjusted field goal percentage takes the 3-point shot into play when you're looking at it. So we know that that's where we wanted to get to on the offensive end of the floor. We were there or close to there for most of the season. We dropped off at the end of the year to about 45% because we shot the ball poorly down the stretch. From a defensive perspective, we know that you're going to want to have a defense of about 35% as an adjusted field goal percentage will have you in the top percentile in the country. If you are above 90th percentile in the country, which means in the top 10% on offense and defense, you can be in a position to vie for a national championship. So this we obviously researched and looked at. And, you know, we look at these situations and say, okay, I don't have synergy. I don't have the ability to look at it that way. But what I did when I was in high school, after about 5 or 10 years, let's say 5 years of mediocrity coaching and not getting to provincial championships, we looked at the provincial championship side of things. And, you know, the average score was in the 30s for women's basketball at our provincial championships and the championship game. So from that point on, we sort of changed our mindset to the fact that, okay, we've got to prepare to win a game which is under 40 points if we're going to play at that level. So it was the same general philosophy as we found looking at how we looked at things. So you have to look at the past season and specifically at the strengths and weaknesses of your players to players M team to build for your future. So what do you do in your off season? Obviously, your off season has to fit from a perspective of what do you need to work on to get yourself into that area. Your off season plan should always work towards your game winning style, work on the fundamentals that may have been missing, and continue to work on knowledge. Okay, so how much time left? I've got about 13 minutes. I told you we're only going to get 5 minutes on this one at the end. Okay, so critical reflections. So from a critical reflection perspective, what I'm saying on this one is this was a light bulb moment for me. It's about 4 years ago. We brought in somebody from Sports Canada. He became our assistant athletic director. And he started with the coaches what's called a season review plan. Now, that's an SRP for us. And what we do is we look at and have to present about a 20-page document on all the different areas that are responsible for having your team be a national championship contender. Now, the reason that I say the word national championship contender is because our school has that in our mission statement for our varsity teams. You know, I was looking online at a job description for another job that was there across the country. I'm not looking for another job, but another job that's there across the country. And in the job description was the statement that we want our teams to be competitive. Well, to me, I couldn't have applied for that job. I know that my personality is such that, you know, that we know that the support is required for us to be national championship contenders. The teams that are at nationals are very similar from year to year because their schools support their programs that way. So we do know that, you know, the overall picture is important there. But the SRP for us breaks into these areas: evaluation and profile of your past season. So we do that right at the end of our season with all of our coaches. We bring our leaders in as a follow-up to that, and we talk about the game-winning style and the things we need to change to clean things up. Key achievements over the season. What did you do well? Last summer, we played 9 NCAA Division I games. We were 4-5. We beat Clemson. We beat Illinois State. We beat George Mason, and we beat UNC Greensboro. We had some great results last year. So they were key achievements for us. Our season went well, but there were some things that happened over the course of the season that hurt us. That takes place down in our major gap analysis. What do we need to fix? Our performance review and a qualitative and metrics looks at the analytics side of things from a team and player perspective. Then our performance plan for the upcoming year is based on that SRP. And then our recruiting is a top priority. The COVID situation this year gave us a lot more time to talk to players, and it certainly helped us fill out our roster at the end of the year. And we're excited about the future at the University of Ottawa and our women's basketball program. So I apologize for talking so much here. I hope some of this stuff has helped you. If I had to do it over again, I probably would have said game-winning culture as opposed to game-winning style, because I think if you truly have your game-winning culture, that the results are going to be what you're hoping for. Dave, anything on your mind?
Yeah, so a couple questions. So I'll start with the last slide first. I really liked your critical reflection framework. What outside input do you get in that process as well? So what other voices are you hearing than other, maybe just your own eyes?
Okay, well, I mean, I think it's great. That's a great question because it comes from the perspective of what we do with this. This is presented to our athletic director, our assistant athletic director, another coach, and a member of our training staff. So all different facets come into play here, and actually a member of our medical staff as well. So we have to justify pretty much everything that we say in this evaluation. I bring in all of my assistant coaches who give me feedback on the season. And as I said, I do feel that because we feel our leaders are so important, especially not at any level it's important, but at the level we're at, where you have a lot of first-year players coming in each year, it's really important that you've got a strong voice from your fourth and fifth-year players. So they're actually brought into this communication as well. Zoom has been great for us this year that way, actually, because we've gone into that conversation. So it's exceptionally important. Now, for me, just so you know, Dave, I'm the luckiest guy in the world. I have 5 fantastic assistant coaches. And that sounds like a lot, and I know it's a lot. They all bring different strengths and characters to the job, and their voices to me are exceptionally important. We, at the end of the season, one of the coaches said to me, "Coach, I think we need to reconsider our quarter court defense." And so we went through and we communicated and argued that point for 2 or 3 hours. So it really is great to have those people around to support you.
Great. So with your game-winning style, and again, we talked a little bit about the longevity of success. How much of it changes annually? So is it a lot of change, per group, per personnel, or is it more of we're going to build this style and then just tweak things as we go?
Now, for us at the university level, if you've got a strong program and you're doing the right things, national championships are typically won by fourth and fifth year players. So for us, it's important that we always have, and as I said, we had a very big recruiting class this year. We've got 8 returning players, 8 new players. So it's a big year from that perspective. But we've recruited a very strong recruiting class that are going to push that older group of players. And I never recruit a player promising them anything related to court time. Everything is earned from our team perspective. But the chemistry and the character you have on the team is going to lead that group to the future. So, the question is that, how much do you change year to year? The reality is when we recruited great athletes this year, I would say, so we're probably going to continue to move back more towards the style we started last year with. Do we change it a whole lot? It's not a whole lot because you generally will only have 3 or 4 important players in their first year. The older group will lead the concepts generally.
Last one is my question. So you talked about your man-to-man system forcing to the weaknesses of your of the offense. You showed your wing action. What do you do on middle ball screen?
Yeah, if there's and this is the thing about basketball and we found this actually when we went to play against the American teams. We were not good enough athletically to run offense from the wing. They wouldn't let it happen. So everything for us at that level had to move into the middle of the floor. We have an outstanding athlete at the point guard position, so she was able to come off of ball screens and make that action happen, right? So anything that's happens from the middle of the floor against us, if it's a horns or a fist screen, that's going to be a reaction. That has to be team defended. It's not individually defended. So we talk about screening. Is it a 2 versus 2 situation, or is it a 5 versus 2 situation? So the idea of middle ball screens tends to be more 5 versus 2. Also, the middle ball screen often results in switch situations where we have to communicate different concepts within our defense. It becomes a little more complicated from the perspective of how we handle it when we're mismatched athletically in switches. So I would probably need a little more time to talk about it. But you and I can follow up on that in the near future.
Yeah, no, and I feel like you could do an hour on that. But again, Coach, we're going to wrap up here with another session coming up. But really appreciated all the work you put into this and the presentation. Some really great stuff here. And I've already got some coaches asking about your contact information, so you had that up there before. But I'm going to give you the last word, and I'll let you, and then we'll wrap up the session. But thanks again for everything you showed today.
It's absolutely my pleasure, and just for getting this thing going at this point. It's great for people who have passion and love the game to have the chance to talk basketball. It's something that I promise you all you continue to get better at with time. There isn't one light bulb moment. You're going to have lots of them. And that's truly what makes this job so special. And it's why people hang around as long as I have doing it, I guess. I'll try to make way for other people in the near future. Thanks a lot, Dave.